Amane was an ugly woman repellent whose only hope of happiness was his miserable sock addiction.
Brother,
This all changed when he helped a depressed emo girl discover the joys of clapping, and now she can't get enough. Their first encounter happened on his way back from school one particularly rainy evening, when he noticed Sheena sitting on a swing in a playground without an umbrella. His first thought was to ignore her, but he eventually changed his mind and went to offer her his umbrella, before continuing on his way. The next day at school, Amane's best friend Itsuki noticed he was sneezing and asked if he had a cold, so he admitted he'd walked home in pouring rain after lending his umbrella to someone, causing Itsuki to call him a simping idiot. However, Amane couldn't help but think of how sad and depressed Sheena had looked sitting alone in the playground. The next moment, he heard the sound of her voice outside the classroom, and when he looked in that direction, he saw her speaking with some students. Seeing the smile on her face made him conclude that it was impossible for her to be depressed, since she was the school angel. Sheena had earned herself that name because she was exceptionally good at everything she did, be it studying or extracurricular activities. Later that day, when Amane got home, he found Sheena waiting outside his door as she'd come to return his umbrella. As soon as he approached her, she noticed he was sick and tried to apologize, but he brushed her off. He took back his umbrella and attempted to walk into his apartment. Unfortunately, his false bravado failed him, and he nearly collapsed right in front of her. Sheena quickly grabbed onto him and insisted on staying so she could take care of him, since she blamed herself for his illness. The moment she opened his apartment door, she was surprised to see that it was dirtier than a pigsty. She then asked him to walk in alone and wait for her while she went over to her house to change. To his surprise, she didn't ride the elevator down. Instead, she ran to the apartment next to his. When Amane woke up later, Sheena asked him to take his temperature, but just as he raised his shirt up, she turned away as she accused him of seducing her with his arms of steel. Shortly after, she returned with some food and served up a plate for him after he told her his temperature. Before he began eating, he admitted he was surprised she wasn't another Sakura, so Sheena explained that it was necessary since she lived alone. When he tasted the food, he said it tasted like his childhood dreams, but she was playing the humility card. After the meal, he asked if she had been sitting in the rain because she'd gotten into a fight with her boyfriend. However, she claimed she didn't have a boyfriend and wasn't planning to get one, which he found odd. He pointed out that someone as popular as she ought to have a boyfriend or two, but Sheena said she wasn't some desperate skank who dated more than one guy, so he apologized for his foolish assumptions. In response, Sheena apologized for being the cause of his cold, but he told her not to feel guilty about it. He claimed that he wasn't as despicable as Gru to hold something like that against the school's angel. Sheena immediately let him know she didn't like to be called by that name, but he just smiled. The next morning, Itsuki noticed Amane was doing much better and advised him to clean up his garbage dump of a room before it led to a rat infestation. Later that night, he stood on his balcony drinking a jelly drink when Sheena saw him and told him he needed more nutrients. Immediately, she was at his door offering him a container of food she claimed were leftovers from her dinner. She also told him that seeing how he lived like a pathetic slob made her feel bad, so she was determined to make sure he ate well and changed his lifestyle. The next morning, he returned the container and was surprised when she gave him another one, which he tried to refuse. Sheena insisted that he take it, saying she always made too much and was happy to share with him since he was well on his way to becoming Brooke's twin, so he thanked her and took it. For the next few weeks, Sheena gave Amane a container of food every day, and one day, while he sat in class, Itsuki pointed out that he looked healthier. Amane told him that he'd been forced to switch things up, but didn't let him know of his arrangement with Sheena, since he wanted to keep it a secret. A few days later, Sheena knocked on Amane's door to collect her food container, but she heard a loud banging sound. When he opened the door on his knees, she asked why he was in that position, and he told her it was because he had tripped. After he explained that he was trying to tidy up, she offered to help him since it was obvious he was bad at it. Amane agreed, so they got to work right away, and she instructed him on how to do things. However, when she tried to clean the air conditioner, she slipped on a shirt lying on the floor. Amane quickly acted like a human cushion to prevent her from getting hurt from her fall, but instead of thanking him, she scolded him for leaving things lying about. After he apologized, they carried on with the cleaning, and by the time they were done, it was too late to go shopping for groceries, so he ordered some pizza. After the meal, Sheena decided to take her leave, but before she left, he asked what she gained from cooking for him, to which she simply replied that aside from the fact that she enjoyed cooking, she didn't like seeing him unhealthy. A few days later, he found her sitting under a tree in the park, so he asked what she was doing there instead of going home. Sheena admitted that she had gotten hurt after she attempted to rescue a cat that was stuck in the tree. Almanig then went to get some first aid materials, and when he returned, he asked her to take off her tights, even offering her his jacket so she could cover up her thighs while he treated her injury. After wrapping her ankle in a cold compress, he gave her his gym sweats to wear underneath her skirt. He also offered her his hoodie to wear so that she wouldn't be recognized by others as he carried her home on his back. The next day during gym class, Itsuki teased Amana for wearing shorts, but he didn't care about it and simply told him he'd left his sweats at home. While they were talking, they heard some girls screaming and calling out to Katawaki, their classmate, who was nicknamed the class prince. Itsuki commented on his popularity, but Amana thought he wasn't it, and that's when he noticed Sheena looking at him. He quickly looked away when she smiled at him, but the other boys with a bad case of illusion began arguing amongst themselves, saying she had smiled at them. That night she brought back his stuff along with a container of food, and he teased her for being a baddie pro max. Sheena told him she didn't understand why guys always reacted that way, so he explained that it was because she was beautiful and popular, just like Katawaki. This made her ask why he hadn't fallen for her yet, just like all the other guys at school. So he told her that unlike her windshield forehead, he preferred a tall woman with a nice pair of eye-catching racks. Sheena then proposed that they split the food bills and offered to come over to his place every day to cook. And of course he agreed, but asked if she wasn't scared that he'd act sus. She however told him she was used to handling balls and would ensure she gives his a dent or two if he tried anything. One night after dinner, Amana had just finished cleaning up the dishes when he noticed Sheena grading the question papers for the test they had written earlier that day. He asked what her score was, and she told him that as long as her essay was fine, her score would be perfect. This wasn't surprising as she was always at the top of her class. However, he was surprised to hear that she had finished reading the curriculum for the next year. When she pointed out that he had good grades, he claimed that maintaining a good grade was a condition he had to meet so he could live alone. When Sheena packed up her things and began walking out of the apartment, Amanda noticed she'd dropped her school ID card. He picked it up and returned it to her. Before she stepped out of the apartment, however, as soon as the door shut, he thought of what to do for her birthday. He had noticed from her ID that her birthday was in 4 days. So the next day, when she came over to cook, he asked if there was something she wanted without letting her know why he was asking. Sheena told him she wanted a new sharpening stone, which had him questioning if she was a high schooler or an old lady stuck in the body of a teenage girl. On his way home from school the next day, he asked Chitos, Itsuki's girlfriend, what sort of gift he could buy for a girl who wasn't his girlfriend, and she suggested he get a stuffed animal. Amanda thought it would be embarrassing if he walked up to the counter with a stuffed animal, but Chitos told him not to be a coward, so he begged her to accompany him when he went shopping. 2 days later, Amani presented Sheena with the gifts he got, but she refused to take them, saying she didn't celebrate her birthdays, so he told her to take them as a token of his gratitude for all she had done for him so far. Sheena opened the wrapped box and thanked him for the hand cream, but when she pulled out the teddy bear, he felt a bit embarrassed, so he told her she could throw it away if she didn't like it. Surprisingly, she told him she would cherish his gift, as she hugged it to herself and admitted she'd never received such a gift. She explained that she never told anyone about her birthday because she hated celebrating it and always felt awkward whenever a stranger gave her presents. However, she thanked him for his thoughtful gift, making him speechless as he struggled to stop himself from giving her a pat on the head because of how cute she looked. A few days later, Amanda's mother came to visit him unexpectedly, and he tried to get her to leave because he didn't want her to know Sheena was hiding inside his bedroom. Unfortunately, being rude to her didn't work because she was already used to his attitude, and when she tried to go into his bedroom, he blocked the way with his body, saying he didn't want her snooping around. This only increased her curiosity, so she walked past him and opened the door before he could stop her. However, she stopped in her tracks the moment she laid eyes on Sheena, who had fallen asleep by the bed. Amanda was equally surprised to see Sheena sleeping, but he couldn't dwell on it as his mother began talking about how cute Sheena was, saying he'd hit the jackpot by getting a girlfriend like her. He said Sheena wasn't his girlfriend, but she didn't believe him and pointed out that a guy wouldn't allow a girl he didn't like into his room. Amanda stood his ground, saying the only feelings he had for Sheena were those of friendship, and begged his mother to stick to her day job instead of trying to play Cupid. He said her love meter was way off, because Sheena would never think of a React-inspired loser like him as anything more than a friend. Just then, Sheena woke up and looked in their direction, so Amanda tried to explain the situation to her. However, his mother walked up to Sheena and introduced herself to her before she asked what her name was. Sheena told her name and explained that she wasn't Amana's girlfriend when she noticed his mom kept referring to her as his girlfriend. This only made his mother assume that things were still developing between the two, and she apologized for barging in on their intimate time. Eventually, they moved to the living room and managed to make her understand their relationship while she drank coffee. His mother thanked Sheena for taking care of her incompetent idiot son and advised her to shoot her shot if she liked him because he was too much of a dense fool to make a move on his own. Amana scolded his mother for calling him a risless coward and asked her to go home. So she got up to leave. However, she called Sheena to the side and took her contact information. After she left, Amani apologized to Sheena for his mother's behavior, but she told him she didn't mind because she liked how his mother doted on him. Amani argued that his mother was nosy and annoying, but Sheena said she didn't see anything wrong with how she acted since she was his mother. She then revealed that she liked how his mother had called her by her name, Mahiru, stating that her parents had never done so, which surprised him. This prompted him to call her by her name, and she surprised him by saying his name as well. So in the end, they'd agreed to use each other's first names when they were alone. She then tried to return the spare key he'd given to her when his mother came knocking, but he asked her to keep it. The following week at school, the results of the test were posted, and as usual, Sheena placed first. So Amani decided to reward her. That night, when Sheena opened his fridge, she was surprised to see a cake sitting there, so she asked why he'd bought it. He told her he'd gotten it for her to celebrate the fact that she was in the first position in class. Sheena tried to argue that there was nothing special since she always topped the class, but he told her to take it as a reward for all her hard work and effort. When she ate a piece of the cake, she noticed Amani was watching her and assumed it was because he wanted to taste as well. Without thinking about it, she fed him a piece, causing him to take the fork and do the same thing for her. Her reaction after eating the cake made him explain that if she randomly offered to feed someone, they would assume she had feelings for them, so she apologized. The next day, Amani went to buy some things at the supermarket and on his way back ran into Sheena. He told her he wanted to cook lunch for them, but since Sheena had about the same level of trust in his culinary skills as I have in my cheating ex, she insisted on supervising him. By the time he was done preparing his sauteed vegetables and omelette, he was panting like he'd run a marathon. He presented it to Sheena, who took a bite of the supposed omelette and told him it was as delicious as a piece of cardboard. That was when he remembered he hadn't put any seasoning in it, and she pointed out that stirring the egg too much had turned into scrambled eggs. Amani felt bad that he'd failed his first attempt, but Sheena cheered him up and offered him the plate of omelette she had made as a sample. She also promised to let him help her out in the kitchen from time to time, so he didn't feel completely useless. Days later, Chitos convinced Amani to have a Christmas Eve party in his apartment because she knew he'd be lonely. When he got home that day, he told Sheena about it and invited her to spend Christmas Day with him since she had nothing to do. Sheena agreed on the condition that he taught her how to play video games since she'd never played before, and he said yes. On Christmas Eve, during the party, Amana complained about Chitos and Itsuki being all cozy in each other's arms. Chitos told him to stop acting like a jealous brat, simply because no one wanted to date a loser virgin like him. While they were talking, she brought up the fact that Sheena had turned down every boy who asked her out and said she felt bad for them. Just as Amani said he didn't care, Chitos got distracted by the snow falling outside and dragged Itsuki to the balcony. Suddenly, she let out a startled scream, and when Amani went to investigate, he discovered that his friends had seen Sheena, who was standing on her balcony as well. Since the secret was out that Sheena was Amana's neighbor, she came over and they explained their relationship to Chitos and Itsuki. However, the two found it odd that they had no romantic feelings towards each other, even though they spent so much time together. Itsuki said he understood if Sheena wasn't into his ugly-ass friend, but he couldn't wrap his head around the fact that Amani hadn't tried to rease his way into her pants, yet since she was a total baddie. Sheena assured them that they were just friends, and Amani added that he would never take advantage of Sheena like a shameless cultured pig. Going forward, they made Itsuki and Chitos promise never to tell anyone at school about their arrangement. Chitos told Amani that even if she told anyone about it, they would check her into Arkham immediately because no one would believe her. She then proceeded to fangirl over Sheena before asking if she wanted to be friends with her. Amani warned Sheena not to befriend the unhinged screwball, but she brushed his advice aside and agreed to Chitos' offer. Itsuki also told Sheena that if she had any questions about Sheena, he would be happy to answer her since they were best friends. After his friends left, Amani apologized to Sheena for getting her involved with them. She told him she didn't mind and said it was nice to meet people since she didn't have that many friends. She then went over to her house to get the beef stew she made for dinner, and while she was gone, he couldn't help but feel bad that their secret had been exposed. When she returned, they sat at the table to eat, and she watched him with a smile on her face. After the meal, Sheena pointed out that Amani always looked happy whenever he was eating, and he told her it was because her cooking was good. While he cleaned up the dishes, he asked where she had learned to cook, and she told him that her housekeeper had taught her. She said she was nowhere as good as the woman since her food always tasted like pure joy. But Amana told her that her food already tasted like joy to him. This left her momentarily speechless until Amani asked what the problem was, so she told him that she wasn't aware that her food tasted like joy. He asked them not to be hard on herself and said her cooking was so good that Gordon Ramsay called her master. The next day, as planned, they played video games after lunch, but when Sheena kept losing, she looked to Amani for help. He moved closer to her and held onto the controller that was still in her hands to show her how to play. When he realized he was very close to her, he quickly moved away and apologized, but she told him it was fine. As she continued playing, she unintentionally leaned each time her character did, eventually leading to her falling into Amana's lap. Amana tried and failed to hold in his laughter, which made Sheena pound her tiny fists on his leg in retaliation. Eventually, she won the game, and he congratulated her for a job well done before he gave her a Christmas present. Sheena thanked him for the gift and admitted she didn't think he was capable of picking something stylish, seeing as he was at the top of the fashion police wanted list. Sheena then moved closer to him and moved his hair away from his face, which left her stunned because she hadn't expected him to look so handsome. Amana felt shy, so he did the same to her and was left speechless by her beauty. But the moment was cut short by Sheena, who awkwardly told him she also had a gift for him. The gift turned out to be a scarf, and he thanked her for it after putting it on. However, she became shy when he began complimenting her smile. She immediately pulled the scarf up to cover his eyes before she went to stand on the balcony, but he followed her and wrapped a blanket in her shoulders. While they stood watching the stars, he thanked her for all she'd done for him in the past 2 months, and she told him she was glad to know him. The next day, Amana noticed Sheena had a high and insisted she rest, but she refused, so he picked her up, threatening to take her home. Sheena agreed to rest only if he let her stay at his place, so he put her in his room and took care of her. After making sure she was well fed and had taken some medication, he held her hand until she eventually fell asleep. The following morning, he went to check on her, and after she ate some food, he put the dishes aside and sat down to talk to her for a while. As they talked, she admitted that the only person who had ever looked after her when she fell sick was her housekeeper, but the woman had to leave at night. Amana felt bad for her and promised to stay by her side until she got better, even though she tried to convince him not to. When she eventually fell asleep once again, he told himself that she was bad for his heart, which could only mean he was falling for her. A few days after New Year, Amana's parents arrived, and when he saw the suitcase his mother had with her, he asked what was in it. She told him she had put a few things she needed inside and asked where Sheena was. He told her she was inside, so his mother walked past him and went to speak with Sheena before Amana, and his father joined them. Amana's father introduced himself to Sheena and thanked her for taking care of Amana, even though he was a useless slob. After Sheena served them some tea, Amana's mother told them she had brought a kimono because she hoped Sheena would wear it during their visit to the temple to offer New Year prayers. While Sheena got dressed with his mother's help, Amana put on his blazer with his father's help. As they spoke to one another, his father asked if he was glad he moved to the city. This made Amana recall a past incident, but he didn't dwell on it and told his father that things were much easier for him now. The next moment, his mother and Sheena came out of the room, and Amana was stunned by Sheena's beauty. On the way out, Sheena whispered into Amana's ear, telling him that he looked good in his outfit, which left him stunned. Later, as they made their way to the temple, Sheena struggled to walk properly in her kimono, so Amana offered to hold her hand. After making their prayers, they stood next to a fountain to wait for his parents, and Amana asked Sheena what she prayed for. She told him she'd prayed for good health and safety, as well as more peaceful days with him. Amana pointed out that with his mother around, he didn't think their day would be peaceful, and just as though she heard him, his mother called out to them. The next day, they bid his parents farewell, and his father reminded him that he had to come home for the summer. Amana agreed to do so, but left out the part where they had asked him to bring Sheena along. The following week, school resumed, and a rumor spread that Sheena had visited the temple with a secret boyfriend, because someone had seen her holding hands with a guy. Itsuki tried to talk to Amana about it, but he brushed it aside and acted like he didn't care about the rumors. However, that night he brought up the issue while he was having tea with Sheena and she suggested they ignore it until it died down. Out of curiosity, she asked if they looked like a couple on that day, and he said he wasn't sure. He also said he couldn't imagine her being in a relationship with someone as worthless and useless as him. This statement made Sheena angry, so she told him that she didn't like his low opinion of himself and listed out all the things she liked about him. Feeling a bit embarrassed, Amana thanked her and offered to clean up. But as he did the dishes, he noticed Sheena hiding her face in a pillow because she was equally embarrassed. A few weeks later, Chitos sat before Amana in his apartment asking for his advice on what to do during the most important event taking place in February. Amana assumed she was talking about their final exams, so she asked if he traded his brain for an iPhone 15 before she explained that she was talking about Valentine's Day. She then asked what kind of chocolate she could give to Itsuki, stating that she wanted to do something different from her usual ones. Amana told her that Sheena was the best person to ask such a question, but Chitos said she wanted his opinion because he was a guy. When Sheena joined them in the living room, he told Chitos that he didn't care for sweet treats because she asked what kind of sweets he liked. She promised to make something he'd like, but he didn't believe her since she sometimes acted like an evil witch and could decide to whip up something crazy. Chitos then asked Sheena if she would give chocolates to anyone, and she told her that she would give some to a few girls in her class. Chitos asked if she would give some to the boys, and Sheena told her that if she did, they would delude themselves into thinking she saw them as anything other than classmates. On Valentine's Day, Amana and Itsuki watched as Katawaki received boxes of chocolates from his many admirers, while the other boys watched him with so much jealousy. Amane pointed out that it would be a hassle for Katawaki to carry all his gifts home, and Itsuki said it had always been like that. When Amane said he'd never received so many chocolates before in his life, Itsuki told him to brace himself. Amane was a bit confused by his statement, so Itsuki explained that Chitos had made Russian chocolate for him. Amana asked what she'd put in them, and Itsuki said some of them contained habanero, pepper, pickled plum, and wasabi, while the others were plain chocolates. This made Amane ask if Chitos had finally lost all her marbles, but Itsuki ignored the question and asked if Sheena would give him chocolates. Amana told him he had no idea and said she had no obligations whatsoever to give him anything since they weren't an item. After school, Chitos gave Amana the chocolates she made and promised he would be fine after eating them. A few minutes after Chitos and Itsuki left, Amana noticed Katawaki sitting at his desk. He then walked up to him and gave him a plastic bag so he could use it to carry the chocolates. Later that day, Amana tasted one of the chocolates Chitos made and immediately regretted his decision. Fortunately, Sheena gave him a cup of hot chocolate to help get rid of the bad taste. When he finished drinking it, he noticed she was acting strange and asked what the problem was. Instead of giving him an answer, she rushed out of his apartment, and when he tried to go after her, he noticed she had left a bag hanging on the door. On it was a note thanking him for all he'd done for her, and inside was a box of oranges with chocolates on them, which he discovered were more to his taste than Chitos's Russian chocolate. The next day of school, Katawaki approached Amana and thanked him for the plastic bag he lent him the day before, causing some of their classmates to begin gossiping about them.
Psych! That's the wrong number!
That evening, when Amana got home, Sheena was waiting for him, so he thanked her for the orange chocolates and asked what she wanted in return. Sheena said she wanted nothing, but he insisted that he would get her something she would love for White Day to show his appreciation. The following month, Amana gave Sheena a flower bracelet and an anything you want ticket he made himself. Sheena thanked him for the gifts and asked him to put the bracelet on for her. Days later, Itsuki asked Amana if he could crash at his place for 3 days since he'd gotten into a fight with his dad over Chitos. Amana agreed since spring break would begin the next day, but sent a text to Sheena to let her know Itsuki would be staying over. When they got home, Itsuki made a joke about disturbing their love nest and earned himself a kick from Amana. Sheena scolded Amana for doing that before leaving the boys alone so she could prepare dinner for them, and as always, Amana praised the meal. That night, before Itsuki and Amana went to bed, Itsuki pointed out that Amana's behavior towards Sheena made him believe he was head over heels for her. As expected, Amana denied it, so Itsuki kept talking and said that even though everyone at school assumed Amana was an antisocial weirdo, Sheena still accepted him. He tried to make him understand that Sheena trusted him and advised him to take a closer look at their relationship. The next day, Chitos called Amana to complain about the fact that Itsuki was staying over at his place and eating Sheena's food. Amana told her that if she wanted to eat Sheena's foods so much she should call her and talk to her, which she did. A few hours later, she showed up at Almane's apartment with a bag and said she would spend the night at Sheena's house. Almane immediately deduced that she had forced herself on Sheena and tried to protest, but Sheena assured him that she didn't mind. Almane then asked what they were having for lunch, and Sheena answered ominously because Chitos had requested it. Almane was pleased with the choice because he liked eggs, and he let Sheena know that he especially liked it when she made it. Sheena became shy after hearing his compliment, and Itsuki, who was watching them with Chitos, said he couldn't believe they weren't dating. Later, after they finished their lunch and Chitos complicated Sheena's cooking, Amanda told her she could be just as good if she took Sheena as her role model. Chitos said she could never be like Sheena because she was so uptight and acted like she had a stick up her ass most of the time. She claimed Sheena always looked bored in school and was distant from the other students. However, after spending time with her, she came to realize that Sheena also had a cute and innocent side, which she loved. As she spoke, she hugged Sheena and told her that if she could loosen up a bit, she could get Amane to do anything she wanted. She said Amane had a thing for nice girls, but Sheena insisted she would never take advantage of Amane in such a way. That evening, just as Amane came out of the bathroom, he received a picture of Sheena holding her teddy bear from Chitos. This left him flustered, so Itsuki took a picture of him and sent it to Chitos. The following day, Itsuki and Chitos left as Itsuki's 3-day visit was over, and he had decided to stay at Chitos' house for a few more days. A few days later, Amane exited the elevator on his floor and noticed Sheena discussing with a woman in front of her apartment. Not wanting to interrupt them, he walked over to the stairs and stood there listening to the woman complaining about Sheena being a thorn in her flesh. When they were done talking, Amane approached Sheena and learned that the woman was her mother. Sheena assured him that everything was fine and tried to retreat into her apartment, but Amane dragged her to his place. While they were there, Sheena confessed that her parents didn't marry out of love, but out of mutual family interests. They had decided not to have kids because of that. However, they made a mistake and Sheena was born. Sheena was raised by her housekeeper, and despite her efforts to excel and gain acknowledgement from her parents, she was unsuccessful. The only reason her parents weren't divorced was because none of them wanted to keep her. However, they'd planned to get divorced as soon as Sheena finished college. Sheena revealed that the day he'd seen her sitting in the playground looking sad, her mother had told her she was an unwanted child. Hearing her words made Amane angry, so he threw a blanket over her head and hugged her. He said he understood why she acted the way she did, and told her that if she wanted to cry she should, so she did. Afterwards, Sheena tried to act like everything was okay, but Amane told her it wouldn't hurt if she relied on someone else for a change. He'd assured her that he saw her for who she was and promised to be by her side, so she thanked him and hugged him. Days later, Sheena and Amane went for a walk, and they talked about the upcoming new term for their school. Sheena was excited about changing classes, and Amane asked if it was because she hoped she'd be put in the same class with Chitos, but she said nothing. After they walked for a while, Sheena hugged Amane from behind and thanked him again for everything. When the new term began, Amane, Itsuki, Sheena, and Chitos were all placed in the same class, and even though he tried to deny it, Amane was glad. Kataweki was also in their class, and when he approached Amane and Itsuki to speak with them, Amane remembered something from his middle school and spaced out. Later, Sheena noticed something was wrong with Amane, but he assured her that everything was fine. She then surprised him by asking if she could touch his hair, and when he said yes, she asked him to place his head on her lap. Amane hesitated, but eventually did it as she asked, and as she played with his hair they talked about their new class. Amane reminded her that they had to act like strangers to avoid suspicion, which made Sheena pull his cheek. When he asked why she did it, she told him it was because he had spoken with no emotions. Eventually, Amane fell asleep, and when he woke up an hour later, Sheena told him he looked cute while he slept. She also pulled his cheeks and told him to be happy he got to see her playful side when he started complaining. A few days later, Amane returned home with a bag full of stuffed animals he won at the arcade for Sheena. Sheena thanked him and hugged the stuffed rabbit to herself, but when she noticed him watching her, she became embarrassed. He assured her that he was only watching her because she looked cute, so she shyly asked what he wanted in return for the gifts. Amane told her he wanted pudding with lots of eggs because he loved her cooking more than anything. So the next day, she prepared it for him. As usual, he praised her cooking, which made her a bit shy, so she tried to cover it up by cleaning up. However, he insisted on cleaning up and asked her to rest while he did, so she lay on the sofa and hid her face behind a pillow. The next day, Kataweki asked Itsuki and Amane if he could join them for lunch, and even though Itsuki immediately agreed, Amane was skeptical. This made him ask Katawaki if he had any ulterior motives for trying to befriend them. Katawaki told him that he thought he was a cool person and genuinely wanted to be friends with him. After Katawaki's reassurance about his friendship, Amane looked in Sheena's direction and noticed her pouting. Later, while they were home, she admitted that she was jealous of the fact that others got to speak with him in public. Amane apologized and told her that it would be weird if he suddenly started talking to her at school. Sheena insisted there was nothing wrong if they spoke to one another and suggested they start slow. The following day, their teacher asked them to form groups for their cooking project, and Sheena invited him to join her group, surprising everyone but Itsuki and Chitose. During the practical, Chitose was surprised to see that Amane wasn't completely useless while they cooked, and he boasted that Sheena had taught him very well, which was very clear from how they interacted. When they were done cooking, Sheena and Amane decided to grab the salad and dessert from the refrigerator. But on their way there, Sheena nearly got burned by some hot soup because some of their classmates were fooling around. Amane managed to save her in time and scolded the dim-witted fools for acting recklessly in the kitchen and almost causing an accident. Everyone was surprised by his outburst and even more surprised when they noticed he held on to Sheena's shoulders longer than necessary, but he didn't seem to care about it. Later that night, Sheena told Amane that she would keep trying to get closer to him at school and let him know she didn't like that they had to pretend to be strangers in front of their classmates. The following week, Amane asked Sheena what she planned to do during the Golden Week, which was a week off school, and she told him she had promised to teach Chitose how to cook. She then threw the question back at him, and when he said he had no plans, she pulled out her ticket and asked him to give her one day during the Golden Week. She said she wanted to go shopping with him, after which they could visit an arcade. So Amane agreed and suggested going to a cat cafe as well. When the Golden Week rolled around, Chitose came bright and early for her cooking lesson. Even though Amane voiced his displeasure at having her over at his house, she assured him that the food they would make would be better than the chocolates she gave him. While the girls cooked, Amane fell asleep, and when he eventually woke up, he was resting on Sheena's shoulders, so he apologized to her until Chitose interrupted them. After they ate, Chitose took her leave and Sheena confessed that while he slept, she pinched his cheeks and ruffled his hair because he looked so cute. She admitted it felt nice, so he told her he also liked pinching her cheeks and even held her face to prove his point. She then reminded him of their planned date and asked if he preferred her to dress up in a prim and proper manner or in a mature way. Amane told her he didn't mind how she dressed, but Sheena insisted that he pick between the two, so he chose the prim and proper look. The next day, Amane was surprised by Sheena's appearance, and he made sure to tell her that she looked good, after which they headed out while holding hands. The first place they visited was the cat cafe, and Sheena felt disappointed when the cat she tried to play with walked away. Amane told her not to feel bad and bought her a cup of chocolate with a cute cat marshmallow in it. Sheena said it was too cute to drink or eat, but eventually drank it because Amane told her it would be a waste. After she took a sip, Amane took a picture of her because she had a foam mustache, and he thought she looked cute with it, so she let him keep the picture. Later, she noticed the cat she attempted to play with earlier was fast asleep in Amane's lap, and he told her he liked it because it reminded him of her. He explained that just like how the cat had first acted cold, Sheena had done the same to him, but when she got comfortable around him, she loosened up. On the way to the arcade, Amane noticed a dress on a mannequin and suggested that Sheena try it on, but while he waited, two girls tried to hit on him. Before he could turn them down, Sheena linked her arm with his and asked the girls to excuse them, after which she dragged him out of the store. At the arcade, she won a stuffed cat from the claw machine and gave it to Amane, who promised to take care of it the same way she took care of the teddy he gave her. When he tried to pat her head, they were interrupted by Katawaki, who assumed Amane was her boyfriend until they explained their situation to him over drinks. Sheena then asked him not to let anyone know about their connection, and he promised to take their secret to the grave before they parted ways. While waiting for the train to arrive later on, Amane apologized to Sheena because he blamed himself for Katawaki finding out about them, but she told him it wasn't his fault as she was well aware that anyone could have seen them. Amane said he was glad Katawaki had been the one to discover them, but began talking badly about himself, which annoyed Sheena. She asked him to stop seeing himself in a negative light and asked if something had happened in the past to make him that way, but he said nothing. Amane spent the next day at a karaoke bar with Itsuki and Katawaki, who questioned him about his feelings for Sheena. Katawaki insisted that Amane liked Sheena more than a friend, so Amane asked if there would be a problem if he did have romantic feelings for her. When he got home later, he found Sheena trying to hide her phone, and after he questioned her about it, She admitted she had been looking at his childhood pictures, which his mother sent. Amanda tried to wrestle the phone away from her because he was sure his mother had sent some embarrassing photos of him, but Sheena refused to let go of her phone. As they struggled, Amanda fell on top of Sheena, and just when she thought he was going to kiss her, he pinched her cheek instead, which caught her off guard, so she handed her phone over to him. However, she refused to let him see that she was touching her lips with a disappointed look on her face. A few days later, Amanda and Sheena were discussing, and she asked why he didn't like going home. So he explained what happened to him in middle school. He said he always felt fortunate to have the kind of family he had because his parents gave him everything. This was why he was very trusting and helped those around him with everything. Unfortunately, he soon discovered that those he considered his friends disliked him and only saw him as an ATM. This caused him to begin distrusting those around him until it began affecting all his other relationships, so he moved away. Sheena felt angry that he was betrayed that way and asked him to let her support him emotionally. Amanda tried to refuse, saying he was already depending on her for so much, but she insisted and hugged him to her. After he agreed to lean on her, she stood up and tried to walk away, but he stopped her by hugging her from behind. The next day at school, some girls asked Amanda if the person she went to the mall with during the Golden Week was her boyfriend. She told them he was someone dear to her, which surprised everyone in the class, including Amanda. Later that evening, Amanda confronted her and asked why she'd lied to their classmates, but she told him she hadn't. She said she considered all her friends to be dear to her, and he was currently the closest one to her. That night, Amanda had a very vivid wet dream about Sheena, which made him avoid her for an entire day. Sheena assumed she'd done something wrong and tried to apologize, so he had no choice but to explain his dream to her. Sheena found it amusing and teased him a little, but let him know she was glad he wasn't angry with her. The following week, while Sheena prepared dinner, Amanda informed her that Itsuki and Katawaki would be coming over for a study session. She asked if she could join them, and he said yes, so she told him that Chitose would join them because she'd begged Sheena to tutor her. When they sat down to eat, Sheena told Amanda that if he made it to the top 10 after their test, she would grant any wish he had. Amanda then told her that he wanted to rest his head on his lap again, so she agreed and even promised to clean his ears as a bonus. Their friends arrived later, and after they all studied together for a while, they ate dinner and left. When the test results eventually came out, Amanda had placed 6th, so Sheena fulfilled her end of the deal and cleaned his ears. When she was done, she played with his hair until he fell asleep, and by the time he woke up later, Sheena was fast asleep. He tried to wake her, but she was too sleepy, so he managed to get her permission to go into her apartment. After he laid her on her bed, she opened her eyes and asked him to join her, but he refused. Instead, he placed her teddy bear beside her, and as soon as she snuggled with it, he covered her with a blanket. The following morning, Sheena went over to Amanda's place and was so embarrassed when he told her what she had done. Amanda also told her to be careful with where she fell asleep, and when she tried to argue that he would never hurt her. He reminded her that he was a hot-blooded male.
Yeah, boy.
A few days later, Amanda walked out of his bedroom and was greeted by the sight of Sheena in her summer uniform. She asked what he thought about it, and he told her not to leave the house without her stockings because her bare legs would excite their classmates. Sheena then asked if her legs made his blood run hot, and he told her to stop teasing him. So she apologized, after which she admitted that she wanted to see his reaction to her uniform. She said she didn't mind him looking at her legs, so he told her that she looked cute in her uniform and begged her to put on some socks. That afternoon after school, Amanda and Katawaki stayed back to help Sheena staple some printouts for sports day. Soon after they finished, they overheard some girls bad-mouthing Sheena, which Amanda didn't like. When they got home, Sheena told him she didn't mind if they bad-mouthed her since they didn't know the real her. Amanda pointed out that some of the girls might dislike her because they believed she and Katawaki were an item, but she told her that Katawaki wasn't her type. When he admitted that he didn't want other people to know the real her, Sheena teased him for being jealous. Amanda felt embarrassed and told her that if she didn't stop teasing him, he would shut her up. Sheena simply smiled and admitted that she saw something special in him. However, Amanda pushed her against the sofa, and while covering her mouth with his hand, warned that the next time she said something like that, he would shut her up with his mouth. As soon as he let go of her, she pulled him back and surprised him with a kiss on the cheek before she ran out. The following day at school, Amanda walked into the classroom, and his friends quickly noticed something was off between him and Sheena. They asked him to tell them what the issue was during lunch, and he admitted they had a little misunderstanding. Since he refused to tell them what caused the misunderstanding, they advised him to speak with Sheena and clear things up. Later that afternoon, Sheena came into Amana's apartment and met him sitting on the sofa, so she apologized for her behavior the previous day. Amana asked why she'd done what she did, and she told him it was because she wanted to get back at him. When he asked what she meant, she reminded him that teased her before and eventually they made up. The next evening, Amana and Sheena talked about the upcoming sports day. Amana took some ice cream out of the freezer, and while he ate it, he got carried away by his discussion with Sheena, so he fed her a couple of spoons. However, the moment he realized what he had done, he gave the rest to her, claiming he wanted to drink coffee instead. When the sports day finally arrived, Amana and Sheena participated in a scavenger hunt race, and even though they were on opposing teams, they crossed the finish line holding hands. Chittos then took their cards and read what was on them out loud to see if they fulfilled the requirements for the race. Amana's card asked him to find someone beautiful, which was Sheena, and Sheena's card asked her to find someone dear to her, which was him. The implication of what happened shocked Amana, but most of all it confused the students. During their lunch break, most of Sheena's admirers demanded to know what Amana's relationship with Sheena was. He explained to the slow-brained fools that they were close friends, but they said a bottom-feeder loser like him couldn't be friends with Sheena. While they complained, Sheena walked in and confirmed what Amani already said to them. She also asked them to stop harassing him and defended him before the rest of the class when they called him names, so they walked away. That evening, Amana sat in his living room thinking of how to confess his feelings to Sheena when she walked in. Sheena sat next to him and apologized for making their secret known to the entire school. Amana assured her that he held no grudge against her for what she did, and admitted that he'd been a coward. He said he was aware of her feelings for him all along, but because he'd been scared, he refused to acknowledge them. Amani then held her in his arms and confessed his feelings for her, after which he asked her to be his girlfriend, and she said yes. As they held each other, he promised to take care of her and make her happy. That's all for today's video. If you got this far and liked it, let us know by commenting simp. Also check out this video if you like recaps like this.